One thing that is an absolute must to get right in an RE game are the enemies. Whether they're just your run-of-the-mill zombies, unique new additions, or bosses, making sure each of them are fun, scary, and balanced are super important to creating the atmosphere you want from Resident Evil. So let's take a look at the enemies from the first game in the chronological Resident Evil timeline, Resident Evil 0, and see which ones are the most and least effective. Hello my fellow oddities, and welcome to every Resident Evil 0 enemy ranked from worst to best. We'll be covering everything from the small nuisances to the major boss battles. So let's begin with number 17. You all had to see this coming. I have the Eliminators. They begin showing up once you get to the training facility basement, spawning there and in the rest of the facility once you go back, usually for the damn hookshot. They don't do an insane amount of base damage, but the amount of quick, successive hits they can get on you will drain your health, especially if you're playing as Rebecca, usually meaning Billy has to relegate himself as a human meat shield. This wouldn't be too bad of a problem if the little guys weren't also insanely fast and agile, and also weren't absolute bullet sponges if you're not using a grenade launcher or something. And that's just gameplay. The Eliminators are also pretty uninspired and not scary design-wise, being just very angry monkeys. And their screeches are also super annoying. At number 16, we have the regular bats that spawn during your fight with the giant bat. These guys will fly around, sometimes run into you and do a tiny bit of damage, and if you're playing Wesker mode, they drop like flies, like they're not even an issue. But playing regularly, the big, and I mean big issue, is the auto aim. I don't know what the developers were smoking when testing out this boss fight, seeing how badly the auto aim redirects you to attacking the small bats instead of the big one, and then just left it in the game. Cause it makes this boss fight 10 times harder than it has any right to be, but I'll get into that more once we get to the actual boss. At number 15, we have the leeches. I have 66.4 hours in Resident Evil 0, and I have 100% in the game. I have never, in that time, ever lost a health state due to the leeches. Basically, these guys pop up in some rooms throughout the game, usually after you've killed one of the Mimicry Marcuses. They crawl around on the ground, and the longer you stay in the room, they'll begin to attach to you and, theoretically, do damage. But anyone with half a brain cell will never be damaged by these things, and other than that, they provide no actual obstacle. I think if they added these in a room where you have to do some sort of puzzle and you have to do it quickly or else they'll start damaging you, that would have been a great utilization, but as they are, they only show up in transitional rooms where you don't actually do anything in them. So yeah, they're not fun to go against cause they don't do anything, they are way too easy, and I guess the way they crawl on you is a little bit creepy and makes you want to leave faster, but that's the best thing they got going for them. They might as well not exist. Still better than the monkeys. At number 14, I have the crows. These guys only show up in two areas of the training facility. Firstly, the room where you get the crank when they crash through the windows, and the outdoor area between the room with the clock and the room where you fight Centurion. In that initial appearance when they come through the window, they can be a problem if you're not quick enough, but that outdoor area is where I always struggled, especially since there's a red herb out there that's really hard to grab for some reason, and the crows do not help. They'll do what crows do and fly over your head, do a little damage. They're annoying, but not the worst thing in the world. Other than that, obviously not scary, and they don't really appear too often, so here's where they go. At number 13, I think this is a bit of a hot take, but I have never liked the Cerberus or zombie dogs at all, which appear during the train section of this game. Especially in these fixed camera games, they are just really annoying, especially that attack where they sort of jump off of you. It doesn't do much damage, but it just pisses me off for some reason. They're small, fast, hard to aim at sometimes. They're like the Eliminators a little bit, not nearly as bad since they can't stun lock you as much and aren't as tanky, but the same reasons for being irritating to go against. Their grab animations are also so long in these games, I don't know why. You just gotta sit there like this and wait for your character to either break out or die. But design-wise, they're obviously a classic RE enemy. The zombified dog look is cool, it's scary, and that's why I can't just place them at the bottom with the enemies that are literally just regular animals and terrorists against my well-being. At number 12, we have the lurkers, the big frogs that'll pop up sometimes during the treatment plant section at the end of the game. These guys are known for one thing and one thing only, and that's ruining no-save runs of this game, because they can insta-kill you if they grab you with their tongue and your partner isn't around to help. And what makes it more annoying is that this is like their only purpose. They do basically nothing outside of just try and fluke you. They have a tongue whip attack, but other than that, you either just shoot them until they die, or they'll run away, which is really annoying by the way. To have an enemy with the unique distinction of single-handedly ruining your game in one moment and sometimes you won't even allow me to kill it? Let me Scorpion Max, bruh!
Vengeance will be mine!
The one thing that I think is good about them is they do make this final part of the game quite stressful, especially on a first time playthrough when maybe they've killed you once, you reload your save, and you don't know when they're going to show up again. Create some good tension. But other than that, there's nothing engaging about them, their design is generic, and you don't even get the satisfaction of killing them sometimes. At number 11, we're getting to the enemies that are less so bad and more so just mid. Here I have the giant spiders, which is pretty much the definition of mid. My biggest issue with them is they can be really hard to aim at without being attacked. For example, in the little cave where a couple of them spawn, they will crawl around on the walls and ceiling, and the only way you can see or aim at them is by getting close enough to change the camera angle, but by that point you're close enough for them to spray you. And if the spray attack was something you could really dodge, I would actually be quite happy with that since it'd be a cool and suspenseful interaction. But because it's so sudden and basically a guarantee if you get close, it's not that fun. The whole poison mechanic in general with the blue herbs I've always found overrated in these games. It just doesn't do anything for me and isn't fun or engaging really. But the spiders are obviously scary, as spiders tend to be, and the framing of them I've always really liked in this game and the RE1 remake. The way they're utilized visually with the fixed cameras are magnificent. At number 10, we're at the first boss of the list, the infected bat in the church. This is definitely the worst boss in the game, and it's mainly for the reason I mentioned earlier, those damn bats flying around and screwing with your auto aim. It makes this boss fight such a liability on certain runs cause you can obviously die, take a whole lot of damage, and or lose a lot of ammo since you're wasting stuff like shotgun shells and grenade launcher rounds on these tiny ass bats. Hell, I would have been fine with just not being able to attack the smaller bats at all if it meant I could actually aim at the boss itself. They do so little damage that I don't care to get rid of them. I know there are cheese strats that supposedly make this boss way easier. I've never been able to get the hang of them. Probably a skill issue, but you shouldn't have to rely on those things to not be miserable. And it's not only that, the boss's design is quite uninspired and its attacks are kind of boring. It doesn't even poop on you like Pipistrello from Castle Crashers. It's still a boss fight though, so generally I find it more engaging and tense than the basic enemies we've covered so far. At number 9, I have the Plague Crawlers. Okay. This is gonna sound kinda dumb, but the main reason I have these guys relatively high, I think higher than most would have them, is because they are so satisfying to kill. Not that they're like really annoying or anything, I'm talking about the sound they make. I don't know how to describe it, it's just so brain tingling and it makes me want to kill every single one of these when I see one, either with the shotgun or magnum, even if it's a complete waste of that ammo. These guys show up throughout the training facility and then later on in the treatment plant. I quite like their design, it's a bit more inspired than the typical animal enemies of this game, since it's actually a fusion of multiple different insects. The two I see most are a mantis in the claws and the length of the body, and a fly in the face and how thick it is. But yeah, gameplay wise, they are pretty basic enemies. Normal attacks, normal damage, but that death noise is just so... Also, when they drop from the ceiling in the clock room, that always gets me. I don't know why. I should expect it, and I do, but I don't quite expect when they drop. It's weird, but I have a fondness for these guys. At number 8, we have the first boss of the game, Stinger. Now, a giant scorpion is pretty freaking cool. I think we can all agree on that. And on a first playthrough, this boss can be pretty panic-inducing and potentially a tough test whilst you're not really thinking clearly. But I think we all know how pathetically easy this boss is on repeat playthroughs. Its attacks, while very cool looking, are very slow and easy to see coming, decently hard to actually avoid, but if you know what you're doing and don't stupidly run forward at it, you should be fine. The strat is just stand in the back, wait for it to come, you don't even need a gun, you can just knife it when it's close enough, and it'll go down like that. Well, if you're using a knife, then it won't be that quick, but still, easy work. It's a first boss that, even with it being the first boss, is still pretty early on in the game, so you don't expect anything crazy, but how can I justify putting this any higher? Just based on aura and the fact that Stinger is pretty badass looking? I mean, I could, it's my list, but I'm not gonna do that. At number 7, I have the regular zombies. Not gonna have much to say here. They are zombies, they maraud forward, they try to bite you, shoot until dead. I think they're the exact same as they are in RE1 Remake. I didn't notice a difference in speed or hitboxes. I think the critical hit chance is a little lower, especially with a shotgun, and they obviously don't turn into crimson heads, but other than that, I'm pretty sure they're the same zombies. They do show up in higher numbers in this game usually, as you now have a partner to balance it out, which I think can make them a little tougher, especially if you get cornered or happen to not have your partner with you. Design-wise, I do like these zombies a little more than the ones in RE1. They appear in military gear, umbrella hazmat gear, engineering uniforms. There's just a wider variety of unique zombie appearances. But yeah, other than that, They zombies, what more do you want? At number 6, we have the Hunters that start out appearing in the facility basement and then become a fairly common enemy throughout the rest of the game from there. Again, they're your typical RE Hunters who will slash at you, sometimes stunlock you, which is really annoying, and if you're not careful, insta-kill you with a decapitation. These guys are pretty scary and tends to be around in all RE games, and this one is no exception. They've always been known for just kinda appearing out of nowhere to jump scare the player, but I think it's especially true for this game. There are a lot of unexpected moments with them here. They would easily be the most unique and visually interesting enemies in the game if they weren't taken from another game. This sort of human lizard frog thing, I don't even know how to describe them, but it's somehow a concoction that works out and looks pretty badass. I also think they're some of the most well-balanced enemies of the game. Despite having an insta-kill move, they rarely do it, seemingly more rarely here than other RE games in my experience, and I don't think they're too tanky or hard to hit here. Just right. Getting into the top 5, I have Centurion, who grabs Rebecca after she takes the fire key. I like this boss because, outside of the final one, it feels like it requires the most strategy out of all of them. Now that's not saying much because the same basic idea of shoot them over and over while not getting hit still applies, but here you kind of have to run around, and if you're like me, you always want to try and shoot it in the front. Because shooting its exoskeleton just doesn't feel as good, so you try and position yourself in front of it, but you have to be careful because if it gets too close, you'll take damage. And even though you don't have to play like that, it's the way your brain kind of wants you to, which makes the boss way more fun. I do think they should have made it so that Rebecca actually takes damage both from you if you accidentally hit her and from the boss itself since it can't actually kill her. Just adds more strategy that I think could make the player think about where they're shooting, since positioning seems to be an important aspect of this boss fight. At least theoretically. But other than gameplay, Centurion's design is really nice, being a giant red centipede, which is quite terrifying, but badass at the same time. Balance-wise, the boss isn't really a threat at all unless you have no spatial awareness, but again, it's an early boss where you don't have access to your partner, which you're used to having at this point, so I don't mind it. At number 4, I have the Proto-Tyrant, showing up in the laboratory while you're playing alone as Rebecca, and then again in the treatment plant. Now, the Tyrant is one of the most iconic bosses in Resident Evil, but I'm gonna be honest, the Proto-Tyrant is levels above, like it's not even close to me. The main reason I think that here is because of the more claustrophobic nature of where it shows up. First, there's the boss with Rebecca, which is in this tiny room with a bunch of rubble. It feels so much more up close and personal, and all the more terrifying because of it. And then the second time, you get more space to move around, but it's on these sort of bridges that are really narrow, so you still don't get a lot of room to maneuver yourself and get away from it. Now, that also happens to be my biggest issue with the Proto-Tyrant, is that some of its moves are just straight up bullshit, I'm sorry. With so little space and how wide the hitbox is on its attacks, there's just no way to avoid it unless you're in the absolute perfect place with the perfect timing. But that's not a huge deal, especially if you're equipped. The bosses aren't that hard. I do remember being absolutely traumatized on my first playthrough of this game because I had left all my good ammo and weapons with Billy, so when I was playing as Rebecca for the first Proto-Tyrant fight, I only had a few shots with the Magnum, and somehow I made it out of that, but I thought it was all over. It took me a couple days, I'm not gonna lie. But that first experience really shifted how hard I thought this boss fight was, because every time after, while I've had more to work with, I haven't even been killed by it. Design-wise, while I wish there was a little bit more to distinguish it from a regular Tyrant, it still looks super badass and cool, probably my favorite design on this list. At number 3, please, guys, don't burn me on the stake for this. I have the Mimicry Marcuses. These guys show up throughout the whole game, maybe about 2 or 3 times per general area, and yeah, a lot of people hate them, and I completely understand. I've had my fair share of rage moments with these things too, particularly when I try and use the Molotov cocktails, and they just miss. Like, the anger I feel in those moments should be enough to burn them down and kill them. But it's one of those things, unlike the Eliminators or the dogs, where I just feel nothing, where after I've killed one of these guys, I go, you know what, I was mad in the moment, but that was fun. They are super satisfying to kill, especially if you didn't use fire to do it, though watching them burn up in flames is very nice, don't get me wrong. But I think the way they make you feel is the main thing I really enjoy about them. They are some of the scariest enemies to me in the whole series. They aren't even super dangerous or anything, they just fill me with this sense of dread. Good dread. The way they move, the music, oh my god, the music is so creepy and heart-pounding. Trigger warning for any RE0 veterans. So yeah, maybe it's a little bit of bias because these were the first enemies in RE to really creep me out since this was the first game in the series that I played, but I really do just think that their design, both visually and in gameplay, is quite underrated. At number 2, I have the first stage Queen Leech right before the final boss. I don't know why I enjoy this boss so much. I think I just remember having so much fun that first time around running in circles being terrified. Cause I think I was super low on health, didn't have any ammo for my heavier weapons, but had a ton of handgun ammo. I remember because you can control both characters with the other joystick, and I was just having both of them run around because the AI's pathing and decision making is just dog shit in this boss, and the presence the Queen Leech has on a first playthrough is just so creepy. Now on repeats, the boss becomes much easier because you can just stock up on magnum ammo, let it grab your partner, and lay into it. As long as you make sure you have enough health items to keep your partner safe, and make sure that it's Billy since he has more health, the boss should be pretty easy. Though in my experience, it always tends to leave you with less than desirable amount of ammo for the final boss, so that's something you kinda gotta work around. The design of the Queen Leech isn't like the coolest thing ever, but I think it's neat. Kind of a bigger, buffer Mimicry Marcus with a bunch of leech mouths on it. But yeah, one of my favorite memories of this game is looping this thing around, trying to find moments where I can shoot it without dying, so it has a special place in my heart. But at number 1, I have the final stage of the Queen Leech at the very end of the game. This is the clear-cut top spot and one of the best final bosses in RE history, which to be honest is kind of a low bar since most final bosses just come down to shoot it a bunch. But this one has 2 stages, where the first is just shooting it, but then on the second you have to distract it while Rebecca turns the valves to open the ceiling, which utilizes both characters in a way that's unique to this game. And that part of it is really fun, especially looping it on this little staircase area. That tends to be the strategy to keep it in one place while staying safe. But it always tends to go after Rebecca after a while, and that part of it is so tense while you're trying to chase after it and get it back on you. Or when Rebecca is moving between the valves and she stupidly tries to run right through the boss to get there, you'd think that'd be more annoying, but honestly it's really fun to be like, Rebecca, stop. But I think that's just cause I could never be mad at my actual literal wife, you guys. Other than that, the only thing I'd say I dislike about this boss is its stupid acid attack, which is just annoying. But its attacks where it turns to hit you with its tail or tries to ram into you are super fun to try and avoid. I also really like its design because you don't usually get enemies this big in RE that are also so mobile. Usually they just kind of blob around in one spot because they're too big and can't move, but this one has that size while also being able to turn, slither around, and it has the space to do that. But it doesn't feel overpowered either, or BS at any point. You have your advantages and it has its, which is just really great boss design. And yeah, that'll do it. Let me know which of these enemies are your favorite and least favorite in the comments down below. Subscribe and leave a like if you want, and that's wraps on this one, my fellow oddities. I'll see you next time.